This will probably be my final chapter recap of the day. But if you're watching all of these, if you're going back through, in advance, or you're watching them for the first time, I'm wearing the same shirt, same hair. It's 12/5/2022. I finished writing chapter 6 yesterday, so these are very fresh thoughts. A couple disclaimers. There's going to be some spoilers in this. If you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch this until afterwards. This is me going through and telling you some of my motivation, why I'm writing the way I'm writing, and maybe to give you some context. As always, I'm going to say, look, until it's published, this may change. Some of the content may change. I may go through and see that I need to change the chapter. I may need to change some things. So some of the things I reference may not line up. If so, I may re-record some, but I'll keep these for posterity so you can kind of see where my thoughts were when I was writing it the first draft. So chapter 6 is called You Call This Balance. And what I wanted to do with this chapter was, as I've said in the previous video, I really wanted to make this a thinking man's RPG game. I did not want the protagonist to fall into the trap of going into an area and trying to kill 27 bog demons or 24 gnolls, or falling luckily on one big lizard king, right? That said, I am going to lean into some of the tropes here a little bit, and I have some fun with the meta here. So in this chapter, the protagonist goes out and he sees his first quest objective, and of course it's overwhelming. Like, there's this huge army, and he's told he has to kill one of the members and survive for 48 hours, right? We also learn that the army is a weird type of intelligence where the person at the top can kind of zone out a little bit and spread their intelligence to the ones below them, and then those people can spread their intelligence to the ones below them, kind of like a computer sharing CPU cycles. So, but they don't share senses and thoughts, so they're not the Borg per se. They're and kind of a hive analog, but different. With the idea being that the way these demons evolved is that over time the smarter ones get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, and they're able to influence and control a larger and larger group. And it's interesting. The hive mentality is always interesting. It also makes for some interesting dynamics and creativity for the character. Now, I will say this. I don't say this in the novel at this point, but Ty does realize he could just potentially shoot a drone as it goes out on a hunt and fulfill the mission. What he's worried about is if one goes missing, if his shot is heard, if there's one he doesn't see, because Ty's not a super skilled hunter, guys. Like, he's got some wilderness lore. He spent 3 weeks doing wilderness training so he can forage for grubs and skin a deer. But he's not an expert by any means, right? He's not going to go and stalk one of these beasts. So in theory, he could just shoot one from a distance, get a lucky shot, meet the quest, and run away. That is 100% up for grabs, and he does think about that. But he's also thinking like what I think one of us would think like, right? If we're readers of LITRpg, if we're tabletop gamers, we're all going to realize that going for gold may be the way to go. So he's going to ask some really important questions that, again, I think that someone in our shoes probably would ask. Now, there might be more questions, quite frankly, that many of us would have asked the game master, the guide, in his shoes, but I wanted to keep the story going, and I wanted to make sure the questions were poignant and relative. And one of the things he discovers, and this is something that I'm using to kind of differentiate my novel from other novels, is that while there is going to be kind of a hit point system, the more magically powerful you become, the sturdier your body gets, and eventually magic will actually kind of give you damage reduction, right? It creates kind of a force field around you and reduces damage to an extent, right? One thing I didn't want to do was remove the chance for critical strikes, for clever uses of weapons. If you have a sniper rifle and you shoot someone in the eye, in some LITRpg books, you're just going to have taken away some of their hit points and nothing will happen. You may blind them, but it functionally doesn't change the way the author would write the fight or write the story, because they can, whatever. So what I want to do is really show that tactical thinking still matters, and that big balls of hit points are kind of a thing, but maybe not a thing. The last thing I'm going to touch on is the protagonist at the end of the chapter. He figures out what he thinks is the puzzle. He figures out the solve for it. He's like, wait. This is too easy, right? This goes back to the falling on the snake and getting the big experience type thing. He's like, this is too easy. There's no way this is going to work. And he asks the guide, he's like, it looks like this was all set up so that I could win. Now, this is super meta. This is super meta. But from the grounded in-world perspective, right, there are elements trying to get time maneuvered into a position. There's a motivation here. There's a reason why he's in that world. There's a reason why balance matters and fairness matters. And what the guide says really, really resonates with me. And I hope it resonates with you too. And what the guide says is, look, you spent 6 months preparing for this. We gave you the cheat sheet so you could figure out, what kind of world you were going to, ish. And you prepared for 6 months. And then you chose to come to this location. These demons, this location was picked because it matches what we think your skill set is, what we think you can accomplish. But everything else is on you. We're not forcing the monsters to behave in a different way. We're not forcing them to do anything. This is how they would naturally behave in our world. They were already here. We just moved you here. The only thing we did to help you out was put you on the probably north side of the valley, because they're in the south side, scouting and getting all their food and things like that, because the north side's doesn't have the rabbit trails the south side does, which he doesn't ask, but I'm just giving you guys that information. So the one thing they say they did was, put him on the right side, and the rest is up to him to figure out. And what I'm hoping you guys do when you read this is you see that and you go, okay, this character's making legitimate, smart decisions. He's making risky decisions, but smart, methodical decisions. And the guide and whoever else is behind all of this doesn't necessarily have to custom hold the character's hand and make him win. I don't want you to feel like that. If I'm doing my job, you don't think the character had to find a convenient piece of wall, fall, crush a snake and gain 5 levels, or, he didn't have to push past his limits to kill 1,000 trolls 100 times. I don't want this to fall into that Larry Stu LITRpg trap without earning it, without feeling like the character is legitimately doing the things that we know justify rewards. This is such a hard thing to balance. I hope you guys I hope you can see this and think about how hard it would be to balance, because I want to keep it grounded. I want it to feel real and earned and powerful from the perspective of the target, not the target reader, but one of the people that I assume is going to read this, RPG player who's been playing for years, a fantasy reader who's like, hey, what if I got the call to action? What if I went over there and it was real? I've seen some of these books before where the character goes over there and becomes a murder hobo, becomes evil, or just gets incredibly lucky and becomes a Larry Stu. And I want to avoid that. So hopefully you guys can read this and you can see where I'm trying to thread that needle of, okay, we're giving you a chance. Are you the person who can figure this out and kind of navigate it without making this the decisions that make so many of these LITRpg books pull me out of the narrative and not feel connected to the character, and quite frankly, not want to read more about the character because I know there's no threat and there's no stakes, and he doesn't have to be, an intelligent, thinking human being. He just goes and swings his axe until things die. So nothing wrong with those books, by the way. They inspired me to write this. So there you go. Let me know and this is a longer video, if you have any comments, if you have any thoughts, if you've read chapter 6. Again, it's on the Patreon right now, or will be. It's $5 on the Patreon. If you're if you're watching this, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, we probably have it on Audible, which means we'll have it, archived the text, and you'll have to get it on Audible. But if you're seeing this, comment below. If you've read it, what do you think? Did I do it? Am I threading the needle right? What could I have done to thread the needle better? All right. Thanks so much. And again, this will be the last one for the day. Good news though, chapter 7's already written. I have to edit it, and then I'm going to be on to chapter 8, which is when it kicks off.